Guys, D22-soso, Wayne Chiang here with Jesse Sylvia, 2012 main event runner-up. Sorry, just not a winner. No, but you did win a WPT. Was it 2016?
It sure was.
Borgata?
It sure was.
Is that where Mike McDermott made a fucking move on Chan in rounders?
I feel like it was like that was the Taj Mahal.
Damn it.
Or no, maybe he goes and plays the Taj.
No,
Maybe it was
is.
Borgata. I don't know where it was.
No, it was the Taj. I'm just
Did
testing.
Borgata exist then when rounders came out?
Well, this is a bit from us on why you're not going to make it as a poker pro. So a month ago, well, let's see, it's March 2024. A month ago, one of my little millennials was just like talking big and how everybody sucks. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe this guy knows what he's doing. And you know who you are, and yes, you are being attacked by me now. So he literally took like, I don't know, 2 or 3 buy-ins. I told him, are you? I asked him, are you, like, how many buy-ins are you bringing in? He's like, I'm like, why don't you just play 100 big blinds? And he's like, 100 BB game sucks. Well, in my head, that's already like red flags. If you say your 100 BB game sucks, it's like, okay, that's like the most standard online form.
Which game doesn't suck if your 100 BB game sucks?
Exactly.
Like, is it 500 deep? Or
Exactly.
Is it like
I did not. Okay, you know who you are. I did not prompt Jesse to say that. if you say your 100 BB game sucks, it's like, okay, then what part of your game is good? Because it's one of the most studied and provable parts of No Limit Hold'em.
Yeah. I mean, if you always played live cash and you just always played like 600 blinds deep, I guess you kind of get it. But that means you've just never played online, basically.
I literally was thinking, I was just like, maybe he's just like one of those like live wizards. And then, you know, after 2 days, he busted his roll. Now he has income, which is like why I don't give up on him. You have a job, fine. Look, all of us are really stupid about this game when we first, not even just first start out, but as we progress, we're going to make mistakes. I made a big mistake year 11, even though it was kind of unforced. Like, you know, I had family problems, but that's too bad. Life's just going to like punch you in the fucking face. So
yeah, I mean, if you live long enough too, you're going to have some unforeseen costs.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's just inevitable down the road at some point.
Yeah. So basically he lost after 2 days. I'm like what happened? This is like we know you could run bad forever or whatever, but this was like one of the softest games. In fact, you've like called me up before, or we've talked, and I was like in this game. And it's just like it's a pretty small game. It's equivalent to $4. It's a Chinese kids game, so it's like in RMB. So it's really small. But the whole thing is like your theoretical hourly in this game is incredibly high due to like them losing or punting, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the rake is low. It's not like a normal home game. It's like, you know, it's a bunch of like you know, it's a bunch of friends, like college and post-college kids. So I was just so baffled. And when he lost his role, this, like, I literally just, like, lost my shit. And he's like, I'm not playing that bad. I'm not that bad. I'm like, you can't take whatever it was, 2, 3, or even 4 buy-ins, claim you can't play 100 BB poker, play deep stacked, and just like torch everything in 2 days. It's not even like you're not even close to making it. Like even if
I gotta ask you, were you staking them? I feel like you were personally.
I was not. I was
okay,
not. I
so
just
you were just annoyed because you had a lot of hope for them.
yeah. I care about these kids, and especially the ones that have jobs. If they're gonna be a vanilla poker pro, I'm just like whatever, you know, GTFO, like like go lose everything, go throw your life away. But like, you know, this kid's done a lot. You know, for me and like a lot of other things, and he's got a lot of potential in life, and I just like, you know, a couple other millennials and Gen Z people I talk to, I'm like, the only way you guys are going to throw away your lives is if you keep playing poker and pretending that you're actually better than you think you are. So I've showed him Dan Zach podcast, Garrett podcast, Sean Snyder podcast, Jesse Martin's, Brian Fees, and I'm just like, listen to this. This stuff's good. And they would always be like, this recent kid hit home the most because they're always like, yeah, it's good, it's good. And then I realized after this kid lost it all in 2 days, I was like, he doesn't realize that when like Dan Zach's saying, yeah, dude, you're not gonna make it, that they're talking about him. That's where it struck me that when these like incredibly accomplished poker players like express this competent guy went bust, this guy who sounded like he knew what he was talking about went bust, all these young kids don't realize that's actually talking about them. And I don't even know what percentage of your network like survived. I know like we have survivorship bias on top of competency as well. So in our networks, less people are going to go bust than, you know, the normal public. Mm-hmm. But even in our networks, like what percentage of people literally just went bust?
Yeah. Or just didn't even go bust, but like, you know, had a particularly rough downswing. Maybe didn't even get close to busting, but just realized like they're just over dealing with that aspect of life. Like they'd rather have a less variance filled lifestyle, and that's fair too.
Guilty.
Yeah, I mean, like that happens all the time where you do it for 12 years and you have one particularly rough downswing and you are really prepared for it, but you're still just like, man, fuck this.
Yeah. Part of it too is just like, you know, and we could talk about like my case later, but just what do you think the pitfalls are as like thinking you're going to make it as a poker pro and just literally 0% chance. Zero. I think the first mistake people make is thinking that it's all about technical skill.
Sure, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I think I've said this in the past to people. I don't know if I've ever said it with you or on record, but I think being good at poker is probably like the third or fourth most important skill set in being a professional poker player. And people kind of don't realize that. Like we've talked about before, like where you are relative to the game that you're in matters most, right?
Yeah.
And so then essentially game selection matters more than your skill set.
Yeah.
To some extent. Like obviously if you're really bad at poker and there's no game that you could beat, then your skill set matters the most. But realistically, game selection and maybe like call it like networking or whatever you want to call it matters a lot more than how good you are at poker. And then I think bankroll management matters more than your skill set, because watch plenty of players who are very good but are just like overly confident in the sense that they think that they can just overcome variance because they're so good, and that's just not a thing.
No.
And that matters more than how good you are. There's probably at least one more. Oh, tilt control. Like you could be, I guess tilt control is kind of baked into how good you are, right? Because if you're playing
part of
a phenomenal A game, but you're never playing it, it doesn't really matter what your top game is.
Yeah, my quote is like the F game, your F game is going to have more influence on your poker career than your A plus game or your A game or whatever.
Even like your C game probably is going to have more influence than your A game, right? Like A game's hard to play all the time.
Yeah.
Unless you're some sort of like gambler phenom where you can just sit down. Sorry, I just lost focus. I'm going to do one of these.
You caught that really quick though.
I'm getting better, Wayne.
I don't think anybody escapes it. And it's kind of like, you know, we see in poker media who's like worshipped. Let's take the recent example. It's March 25th, 2024. Tom Dwan. Like recently, it's like, boom, Tom Dwan owes $30 million. And the grinders of like, you know, that era plus like 10 years after that, probably even still to this day, is like, of course he's going to do poorly, you know. Look at the way he plays.
I mean, Helmuth was right, man. Helmuth was right. How does he keep doing it? This guy never misses. He said, "We'll see if you're even around in 5 years," and he's still around. So I guess he wasn't right in that sense, but
well, the thing is, you know, Helmuth was right, like tendency wise, but what happened was, like Helmuth knew this too. If you're poker famous, you can just get backing, baby.
It's true. How does Helmuth never miss?
I don't know. Does he? like,
I don't know.
I think he is right in premise all the time, and then people just don't necessarily appreciate, or just, even when he's right, like, people's execution can like go around it, and you could just like kind of fudge it because like people don't know publicly what's going on, like how buried people are.
No, but it's just funny. Like at the time when he said that to Derek, Derek was like, I believe, the #1 online cash game player. Nobody would even sit him heads up. Um, and Helmuth's just like, this kid won't be around in 5 years.
He said, let's see if you're even around 5 years.
Yeah, and we're all just thinking, you're ridiculous. This is the best player online, which means he's the best player in the world or whatever. And but yeah, that is a great example, by the way, of skill is not the most important thing.
So trivia, obviously the Dur challenge and then Antonius. And again, like, just because you lose to a superior player to you does not mean by any means you're bad. It's just like the other players is better than you. So Dur beats Antonius and then concedes against Jungle. And sometime after that, somebody named Free Monies supposedly took the rest of his role on Full Tilt. Do you know what that is?
Who is it?
Free Monies?
Oh no, I remember Isildur took a ton of his money.
Yeah, but this guy named Free Monies busted his account, allegedly.
Oh wow, I don't know about that at all. Actually, I guess Isildur probably took a lot of his money before the Jungle Man challenge, because the Jungle Man challenge went straight through to Full Tilt collapsing, right? So that was,
I don't know.
I guess the timeline would be Isildur takes his money, Jungle Man takes what's left, sort of, and then the challenge gets put on hiatus, then Full Tilt collapses, and then I guess this guy, Free Monies or whatever, takes the rest.
You know who this guy is? IRL, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Is this something I'm going to have to ask you off?
No, you can ask on.
Oh, who is it?
He's a friend of Doug Polk's.
Oh.
Does that narrow it down?
Was he like a former student? Was it?
I don't really know their history, but just I'm gonna let you guess this one. Let's slow roll the audience a little bit. It can only be so many people. Well, yeah, I mean that's kind of like all of Doug's guys.
Yeah, that's true. Actually. Oh, is it? It's not Fees, is it?
It is Fee. It's Ryan Fee.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very Fee name. Free name.
So yeah, like technical skill, and the thing is, as you get more known, people will like figure you out, and they'll have a group of people like figure you out. That's something that, when you're coming up, you don't really have to face. So I remember, like, in the peak of my game, like online and live, it's like stupid because like everybody discusses players, and then when you become the subject of being discussed and dissected, yeah, they may like underestimate you here and there, but eventually like a lot of your tricks are just going to get nullified, or just like, the effectiveness just gets reduced.
Yep.
So
yeah, I mean, sorry, go on.
No, but so like kind of just like you said, like technical skill is probably like the fourth most important, and this goes into a different subject matter too, is like studying poker, especially no hold'em. It's like with poker, you can only go to a higher stake that exists. If it doesn't exist, then you're shit out of luck. Mm-hmm. Or you could study another game, move kind of like sideways, and then move up in stakes there. Like currently, it's like no limit hold'em. Back in the day, it was limit hold'em. Now there's kind of PLO and mixed game, but mixed game, it's like you're going straight to like 3 figures, in the blinds, like right off the bat. Like these mid stakes mixed games, they don't really survive, or the mid and low stakes.
Yeah, it's like, I think in Vegas, the biggest one going most days is something like 2040 or 3060. And then there's a 200, 400 or 300, 600, I believe. And then there's like, 1K, 2K in Bobby's room occasionally. So there's some pretty big gaps there. If you want to be good at mixed games, you gotta kind of fill the holes with other games.
Yeah, and even for mixed games, it's like you can't really have like a weakest game. Like you could play ABC tight in your weaker games, but like the more you do that for each of the mixed games, the more you're just missing out.
Mm-hmm.
So we've heard like a million people discourage the public on being a professional poker player, and it's why people get so entranced with professional poker. We've been there too. We run good for like a week. Like, oh my god, my hourly is like 10 trillion. And the thing is, after you have like, millions of hands online, hundreds of thousands of hands live, then you realize you run good when the game is good, which is correlated with the economy. And that's it. That's where all your run good comes from. Like, it's like, sure, there was ability involved, but how hard is it to play when you just cooler the guy? Or you just have it, and they actually have money to pay you off.
Yeah, we're not very good at taking into account all the factors that run good can include, right? Like tournament players are really good at this. Like we chip up and we lose our all-ins, but we've chipped up and we think we're just playing great. But we forget that our card distribution was better, or our table draw was really good, or
Position.
like you said, we happen to get our hands against like the whale at the table, and he's just the guy who pays off with fourth pair.
Or you run good against the other pros too. That's huge too.
Yeah,
Like
or you just, you don't like maybe there's one pro who's 3-bet 6 times, but he's actually a huge nit and he's always had it, and you just happen to not get a hand against him, but you're sitting there thinking like, I'm not going to put up with this any longer, and you just don't find the spot to torch it versus him.
Yeah.
That's a really good example.
Yeah, I think one of the toughest things too is just like when you keep getting 3-bet over and over, are you being bullied or do they have it? And I would say most of the times they just have it.
Yeah. People don't generally try to attack the guy they've been attacking for the 9th time. They pick another spot.
Yeah, I mean, like in those highly competitive online games, like when you're out of position, you're just gonna get 3-bet like crazy until you show them that this is not gonna work for you, or we're both gonna get hurt if you keep doing this.
Yeah.
That
Absolutely.
was after Black Friday when I was on the Cake Network. Like the 3-6, the 5-10 were super good, and when you get to the 10-20, or what do they call it now, 2KNL?
I guess so, yeah.
They call it landing.
The internet kids are used to 100 big blinds, Wayne. So we just say whatever the 100 big blind buy-in is.
So the people on the Cake Network were all like pros from other sites that went down, and just like very quickly, like 3 months in, you see just a bunch of people pop up, and they're just like playing very well. Like when I first jumped on Cake, I'm like, oh, this is great. Why didn't I just jump in here before? And then, when you're in the cutoff and you raise, the button's like 3-betting you just like 60%. You're like, okay, they're here to test you. So you have to show them, you have to make them stop doing that by punishing them with all your out of position tricks, or you're both going to get hurt. And you're going to tell them, you know what? We're both going to get hurt. So let's go.
Well, I'm not going to lie. Somebody's 3-betting me 60% button cutoff. I'm loving that.
It wasn't fun with these guys, but
no, I know what you mean.
Yeah,
your variance is very high.
Both people are going to get hurt, even if you're like winning against them.
Yeah.
And a lot of times out of position, like you're going to guess wrong a lot.
That's funny. That kind of reminds me of the cartel back in the day. Heads Up Singos. Are you familiar with the cartel?
You told me about it, but tell the story to the audience.
So the cartel would basically be a conglomerate of heads up players who weren't they're really colluding or anything, but they're basically like, we'll share lobbies and we'll agree to not sit each other, right? And so let's assume that every reg agree to do this, then you have a time slot, you get to sit, and because every other reg won't sit you, then you just get the random fish who sit down. And the way that Heads Up Singos work is there's only 1 or 2 tables in the lobby for any given stake, so you just get the whole stake and you get the fish sitting you. But if a new guy shows up who's not part of the cartel, he's not part of the agreement, right? So
Yep.
if he tries to set the lobby, what happens is the whole cartel just keeps playing him and playing him. And because like the nature of heads up sit and goes is your ROI is very low already. And so if you're playing a bunch of regs, like you might dip into a negative ROI because you're both getting raked, but each reg is sharing that little bit of loss, whereas you're taking on the whole loss against all of them. So you just kind of get grinded down by the cartel and pushed out of the games because you can't deal with it for as long as they can. Like they can absorb the loss for longer
Yeah.
and split it between them.
Did anyone who figured out who Sally Wu was on Full Tilt?
I have no idea.
Okay. Well, that person played other people. They didn't play me.
They didn't play you.
They didn't play me. They were like outbiting me. And I was, like, if I'm going to sit down, I'm emotionally compromised. So please play me. But
Yeah.
no, wasn't bad enough, I guess.
I mean, there's a few people I'd like to know the screen names too.
Sure.
There was a tournament player, um, Viet Cong. way
Oh,
back
that's
in
on
the day.
Poker Stars? Or was it Party Poker?
Yeah,
It's
and
Poker
they
yeah.
won like the Sunday Million like 3 times, and no one knew who it was. And this girl claimed it was like her father, who was like 58 years old or something like that. And
Yeah, I don't know about that.
it was an interesting little.
Well,
It was funny.
let's solve all these mysteries because, apparently Garrett and I both played in the 1020 no limit on Party Poker. We were in the same pool. But I can't remember anybody's name. Yeah, I don't know if he was G-Man Poker. My name was Jack Bauer, where the E was a 3.
I kind of remember that screen name actually.
Oh, that
I
was
never
me.
really played Full Tilt though.
Well, I was on Party Poker. This was like 2003, 4, 5, somewhere around there.
I used to play with a guy named Pass the Ganja.
I don't remember anybody's name.
He would do some interesting stuff versus me, and I like playing with him, And then 8 years later, or whatever, 6 years later, I'm playing at Port Bellagio now. I'm like a Bellagio regular, and I'm playing with this ex hedge fund owner who's a wildly zany dude. I really love seeing this guy around. He's awesome. And he told me his son was currently in rehab, but used to like to play poker on Full Tilt. I was like, what was his name? He was like, Pass the Ganja.
Oh my god!
I just lost it, dude. I was like, are you serious? I told him the whole story. I was like, bro, like, this guy was amazing. We used to battle, and it was good.
Well, now he's in rehab.
Yeah.
So we covered bankroll management, emotional control, tilt or whatever, game selection, and technical skill. There's some...
I've got a couple others, by the way.
Yeah, let's talk about technical skill. How much technical skill do you really think you need?
Should we rank these at the end? I feel like we should take
Yeah, for sure.
all of them and rank them in order of importance.
Yeah.
Okay, one that I came up with was emotional decisions versus technical decisions. So just
Yeah.
what is driving your decision points, like emotions or technical.
Yeah.
And I think it's not as black and white as like, oh, I always am driven by emotions, or I'm always driven by, like, you could just reach a state where you become more emotional in your decision making, right?
Yeah, no, I have definitely negative stories about myself in that, and I have pretty high willpower for, my pro days. Even
Yeah.
now, so it's just like for me to kind of like hit a threshold where I know I'm emotionally compromised, then that's kind of like, okay. It was a big lesson for me because I realized once I hit it, other people are hitting it at a way earlier stage.
Yeah.
And that like really kind of like educated me on like how long should I be playing? Because you could try to like outlast people, and in the Commerce Days after Black Friday, I definitely outlasted people in sessions. But like, should you be? Obviously, it's damaging for your health. But like, are you one of those guys who could just like outlast people? Because if you are not one of those guys, you need to get the fuck up at some hour mark.
It's true. By the way, I think that's a really dope realization when you notice that you're yourself hitting a
Emotionally.
certain stake where you become emotionally driven, or maybe you're tighter, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And then noticing that other people do it at lower stakes, and then the next level to that is identifying who's doing it at different stakes, or who's trying to lock up wins or whatever, and then putting the pressure on them
Yeah.
in big pots.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be a massive edge, and that's something that you kind of talked about in the past. Like Garrett got really good at, right? Is like
Yeah.
figuring out where their breaking point is, and
Yeah.
who's just not putting that much money in the pot light or whatever.
Yeah. And just like, I hadn't played No Limit live, like grinder style, because like I have, work, so I have a regular schedule now. But just like, I'll go back in the morning and I'll see people on like hour 16, and I just forget how worn down these people are. And your physical and emotional endurance at that hour, if you're weaker than the other guy, you're just losing. It doesn't matter if you have superior technical skill. Like, because the superior technical skill is marginal, like we know. But if you're paying off people on like a technical skill basis or like a feel basis, and all of a sudden, when you're on your top of your game, it's like you have pretty good accuracy, and then like hour 16, it's like falling off. You're not going to make it.
Or it's going to be a very tough road for you if you do make it, and it's going to be a bumpy one.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely know. Well, I don't know their fate like as of today, but there's definitely some people who got emotionally compromised that, were still around after a long time, but they would play shorter sessions than like I would.
Yeah,
And
and they're probably somewhat miserable because they're just emotionally swinging all the time, even in those short sessions. And
yeah,
that's a good example of when they say it's a tough way to make an easy living. Like you look at a guy like who's a good example, like Ari Engel.
yeah,
I mean, maybe Ari is just boiling inside, but he looks like he's just loving it. He's just like he looks like he's enjoying every moment of gambling. And that's like the easy living. Obviously, he deals with the same swings as the rest of us and everything else, but he looks like he's just chilling. Even when he's losing, he's having a good time.
I played with
Most
him.
people aren't doing that.
Yeah, I played with him the last 3 years. He was probably on a downswing, and I've read an interview on him when he was on a downswing, and he was just like really hurting inside because he plays like live tournaments. I don't know if he plays like online. He says he mainly plays live. That's rough.
Yeah.
And the way that he's just like broken down, like he busts from the main tournament, right? Or whatever, the highest no limit or the highest mix or whatever alternate game tournament going on. He'll look at what's registering and then mathematically figure out if he should play an alternate game. Have you seen this?
No.
So he may not re-register for the same tournament. He will look at like if there's like a mixed game, like an 08 game, or actually he loves 08, so he's always going to play that. But like a ace to 5 triple draw, or deuce to 7, or a 7-card stud high, or the no limit, which we all like. He hates the no limit tournaments. Obviously he's winning, but I really know the sentiment, because like when I get a chance to play an alternate game, I love the alternate games because your edge is so much easier to prove. Whereas like no limit hold'em, when you start playing like with a bunch of like tightish players, or regulars or pros, like your edge is really much harder to prove, especially with rake. Like these guys, even like bad players, like they still know how to play like queen jack offsuit, in full ring, or well enough that they're really not giving it away. They know
No,
when.
yeah, you gotta grind, and you gotta play some stakes and some big blind depth where you can really see a decent win rate, right?
Yeah. And then, so when I played with Ari those couple times, one, oh my God, I don't want to blow his cover, but he does prop bets that help his EV. He has an Omaha 8 or better prop bet. I couldn't believe my ears when people were accepting it. All right, just threw him under the bus. Anyway, He
This
was
one might hit the cutting room floor.
well,
Depending.
our shit doesn't get that many views anyway, but and especially not from people who are playing with Ari Engel and taking prop bets against them. So the chance of them hearing this is so low, and even identifying it even worse. So other people would take these prop bets against them, and I'm just like, I didn't blow his cover. I'm like, how are you getting these guys to do this? I'll give you, Jesse Sylvia, a hint. It's like if we did a prop bet on cards in the flop, and I picked 2. Right? Are you gonna let me pick
Cards
2?
or the 2?
Like the number 2.
Okay.
Would you ever let me pick 2?
The number 2?
The number
to
2
be on the flop?
Yeah. If we're prop betting, like $100 per number.
I mean, I would assume that the 2 is nice to have, right? Because we're seeing flops more when I have high cards and you have high cards.
So would you let me have the 2?
No, I would probably not let you have the 2.
Okay. Well, let's just say he does something very similar to Omaha 8 or better.
Okay. Oh, he gets like the 9.
Whoa. Let's not talk. Let's no strat talk here.
That's funny.
Yeah, and then I think he might be on a downswing, and then so he was okay, but like yeah, he's pretty even keeled, but none of us can really sustain an infinite downswing. Like all of us break.
Yeah.
So,
it's tough, man.
Yeah.
You I mean, I look at a guy like Limon.
Lyman.
So you say Lyman.
Yeah.
Lyman.
Feel free to retweet, by the way. It's up.
All right, sweet. I look at a guy like Lyman, and he really preached if you want to be a gambler, poker player, whatever, you have to have side sources of income coming in, whether it's apartments you have bought and rented or vending machines or whatever. I think he had like a few businesses that were golf related at the time.
Oh, did he?
And
wow.
I mean, it's just like, yes, in a vacuum, you could just play poker and you'd be totally fine, right?
Yeah.
As long as you're playing good games and you're playing somewhat close to your A game and all that.
Yeah.
But like in theory, you could do that. But there's just so many, I don't want to say intangible things that side things, but because they're clearly like.
They're definitely tangible. I think it's more just like you could define them. They're difficult to quantify, but the second you start falling off a cliff is when things are bad. So that goes to 2 other qualities which you're not going to make it. 1, if you have a table game habit, you're done for. Like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
2,
I kind of didn't even think of that one because like that's almost like a given to me, but you're right. Like, I mean, you better budget in your table habits if you got a table.
Yeah, and the part of it is like because I don't play table games, I designed them. Yayo. But if you because I never caught them in the pits. So like I would hear so and so has a baccarat problem or a blackjack problem. And then I'm like, they do? Because I never go in. But game recognized game. The guys who go in all see each other, so.
Yeah. Oh, I got one. Okay, so another one that I wrote down was, and I kind of stole this like general idea from trading, but it's obviously true in a lot of facets of life, and it's very true in poker. You are incapable of making a plan and sticking to it. If you're incapable of making a plan and sticking to it, you're gonna have a very tough time at poker. So that could be like bankroll related. Like, you tell yourself, I need 50 buy-ins for a cash game before I can move up. Or I need 50 buy-ins to play any given cash game. So like I need 50 grand to play, or let's say 5,000 big blinds. So I need 50 grand to play 510, and so on and so forth.
Hey, millennials, this Mr. Jesse Sylvia says you need 50 buy-ins.
I mean, you make your own rule. Like if you want to be really aggressive about it and you're playing live poker and there's good games around, like you could make it 30, but as soon as you get below 30, you got to drop down. Like even if you made it 20 or 15, in theory, if there's low enough stakes for you, you could just keep dropping down. That gets really complicated in analysis because sometimes if you lose too much, you have to drop down 2 stakes, but that first stake drop down was a lot more profitable than 2 stakes down. So you got to be careful about that. But anyways, quite often people make a plan and then they lose at a stake and then like, well, I only have to win a little bit at the next stake and I'll make it all back. and I won't play there for too long. And trust me, a lot of these are coming to my head because I've been guilty of them in the past. Back when I was trying to spin up a role or had a decent role, but was playing online, when I was in college in like 2008, I would lose at 5-10 and then take a shot at the guy who looked the softest based on his picture at 25-50 heads up to try to win it back. You know what I mean? Like, I have a lot of good mistakes that you should learn from and not repeat if you can. But you could also be incapable of making a plan and sticking to it in other ways. Like, for instance, you have a plan to practice or study an hour a day every day, one part of the game tree, right? Like you're saying one day you're like, okay, I'm just going to look at and study how to play big blind on different stack sizes versus late position opens. And you get very good at, you sit down, you figure out all your 3-bets, and you get really good at that. And then the next day you say, okay, now I'll do like button versus hijack opens. And then day 3, you're just like, all right, I'm just going to go play. And then day 4, you lost on day 3 and you stay up late and you wake up late and you're like, oh, too late, I'm going to go play. And then like a week later, you're not studying at all and you're just going in and playing. And every day you're playing a little bit worse than the last day. That's like a pretty great example of making a good plan and not sticking to it. So if you're that kind of person, you're going to have a lot of trouble in poker. Like, it turns out that, at least in this day and age, maybe back 10 years ago when we're all putting our feet up and taking the easy money, it was different. But in this day and age, you need to have a decent level of discipline in your schedule and in what you have as goals, executing your goals.
Yeah. I mean, the games are just drying up everywhere. There's going to be spikes, mostly due to economic conditions. You never know when a single or a group of people have a windfall. But in general, when the economy is just better and people are making more money, like, all income echelons are just going to be playing more poker and they're just injecting more money into the player pool. And that's kind of the economics behind poker that people don't think about, especially when they're coming up. I know I didn't, which is you're so focused on your own skill and your own like ability, your hourly or whatever, you don't realize that when you're doing better, one, you ran good in a good environment. Like, it was because people had money. The second they run out, you're going to be facing tougher opponents. They may not be better than you, but the rake is going to hurt you. Like, your win rate's just going to go down. And then just like, so what if you're the best player in the pool? You're not winning at the rate that you were. Could be a third even, especially in like big bet games when, if 1 to 3 or to 5 people were feeding the pool and they're no longer there, like your win rate's like just dust compared to when they were there.
Yeah, that's a nice side point. So what I was saying is, like, you need to be constantly analyzing the games that you're in. It's sort of a side point to the whole like game selection is more important than actual skill set. You need to be analyzing the games you're in constantly and rethinking whether it's the best game for you. Because the best game for you a month ago might not be the best game for you now.
Yeah, that's where learning different games is just huge. And also just like, Sean Snyder and I talked about this too. Sometimes playing 2-3 no limits better than playing 5-5. Because the people that 2-3 are just putting their stack in more liberally if you're, kind of in that echelon. Especially nighttime on like Fridays and Saturday nights.
Yeah. I think humility or a lack of ego is actually really massive in poker. Obviously, you need that competitive drive just so you can wake up every day and want to go get better and want to go play and want to go smash people, basically. And you need that level of confidence. But having that ego, like taking it as a personal insult that you sometimes need to move down a stake, or sometimes not even move down a stake, but just like you said, like the 2-5 game is more profitable than the 5-10 game today. That happens, that's the thing that's true in a poker room. And having that lack of ego. One of the people I kind of molded who I wanted to be as a poker player around was, the first and only backer I ever had. He would show up to the poker room some nights and he would be backing me and I'd be playing 25-50 PLO no limit. Great game, right? but he doesn't play PLO, so he doesn't want to play that game. And there's like a 20-player wait list for 10, 20, 40, which he's a big winner in. And so then he goes down and he's on the wait list for 5-10. And so he goes and plays 2-5 for like an hour and a half. And he comes over and says hi to me. And I was like, what are you doing? I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm playing 2-5 while I wait for the 5-10, while I wait for the 10, 20, 40. Meanwhile, he's got, a nice chunk of me in this game 10 times the stakes. And it's like, I just immediately looked at that and I was like, that's who I want to be in poker. Like, he just doesn't care at all. He's like, yeah, or I think he even could have gotten in the 5-10 game, but it looked terrible. And the 2-5 game was great. He's like, I'm clearly going to make more money in the 2-5 game per hour.
Clearly. No, just like, he's the one analyzing the stuff. Just like when I see Ari Engel at the tournament room, like running around, like picking which tournament to enter, I'm like, I have no idea what's going on in his head. Because he's whatever genius is, he's calculating the prize pool, the entry, the ROI, the guaranteed, like, if the guarantee is going to get hit, like, there's so many things that I'm just like, I know which variables he's calculating, but I'm just nowhere near the capability of being able to figure that out.
Bro, don't ever try to enter the mind of Ari Engel, because it is an interesting place. I'm not saying he's not an incredibly smart guy, because I imagine he is, but he's done one time. He was in a tournament and he 4-bet a guy or something. I think he like 3-bet a guy and the guy 4-bet him, and he tanked and he looked at the clock like he was randomizing basically, and then he went all in and the guy called him and he had Jack 4 offsuit.
Whoa, shout out to Robbie.
Yeah, I think it was Jack 4. It was like Jack 4 or Jack 3. And it was like, bro, you weren't randomizing. Like, that's not you don't do that 10% of the time. You don't do that ever. You know what I mean? So maybe it was like fake randomizing, but it wasn't like the guy was paying any attention to him. The guy was just staring down at the table. So
what was?
But yeah,
what had to do with the
Ari's
clock?
a hilarious human being. I love Ari.
What was about the clock? Maybe the clock was about to jump to the blinds when he was on the button.
Oh, that's possible.
Oh, you were
sure. It looked like he was randomizing, but I don't know.
I'm literally joking because.
No,
actually,
that's a
maybe.
thing.
Yeah. No. That's true. But because the thing is, like, if it just so happens that you need the clock to run out like 30 more seconds and you get the blind increase on the button, tank ship, right?
Yeah.
Because dealing the hand out takes a while.
Pretty much. All right. My third one that I came up with was, you are making the same types of mistakes over and over again. So if you're not fixing those mistakes, and that doesn't just mean, oh, you're not sitting down and studying and figuring out your mistakes. It could just be as simple as you identify that this was a mistake, and then you go in a week later and you do it again. We've all done that before from time to time, but if you keep doing that, I can't imagine poker is going to be the thing that you excel at compared to other possible choices in life. And then kind of a side note to that is basically just you're not improving over time. But one of my favorite quotes was by Jason Kuhn. He said, if you don't look at your game from 6 months ago and think, man, I sucked, like, you're probably not improving enough. And that one always really stuck with me.
Well, I'm so far out of my prime, and I'm still improving every day. But I do see that there's certain tricks that I still have that my player pool hasn't figured out yet. But other things, the damage gets mitigated. I think the same thing happens with Garrett. Like, when he was first playing on stream the first couple of years, he had a lot of tricks up his sleeve. And now, because there's so much footage of him, he's just not able to get away with certain things. Like, Dan Zach had a move in a certain spot. He didn't tell me. I don't, it's nice to even know of his existence. I wouldn't even understand, even if he did tell me, how brilliant it was. But he had a specific spot against Garrett that he was planning if the situation ever came up. But it's just because they have so much history and they're playing on stream, so they could like actually get information almost HUD wise.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that's just like crazy, because if you're playing the same player pool, you never see their whole cards. You don't know what's going on. You only see what happens when they flip over the cards.
The last time I played on stream last week, I was shocked by some of the hole cards I ended up seeing from a couple players.
Yeah, exactly.
What was the player's name who was to my direct left? Was it like David?
Yes. He came in late, right? An hour late.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
He just smashed people. He like
Yeah, just David.
Yeah, he's real unassuming that he 3-bet me big with like 3-4 offsuit or something like that.
Yeah, it is David. I remember. I didn't see
He could have pulled that shit off against me for years before I figured that out. You know, if he was real tricky about not getting the showdown and stuff like that.
Sure.
But yeah, that's a really good example of what you're saying.
Yeah, and just like, you know, there's some tricks. And the thing is, like, in the end, even if you have like X amount of tricks, they just make it not useful enough for you to win at a high enough rate or come up at a high enough frequency for them to manifest. And your opponent, whether on purpose or an accident, can still outplay you even if you have like these tricks up your sleeve.
Mm-hmm.
Which kind of goes the next step is like a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this, and you're probably guilty of this. All of us are probably guilty of this. You see somebody on TV, you see their whole cards, and you just completely, I don't want to say completely, you underestimate their ability. Because you see a couple clips of them on camera, and you're just like, oh, that's exploitable. And then you play them in real life when their whole card's face down, you're like, this is a lot harder than, you know, when you can see their whole cards.
Definitely. It's weird because some people I think the whole cards being revealed are really bad for, and other people are really good for. I think like for somebody like me, it's better to see other people's whole cards because I'm playing a little more like closer to what theory dictates than a lot of people, so I'm not too worried about them seeing what I'm doing. It's like, yeah, obviously I'm bluffing in every spot sometimes or whatever, but it's not going to be like super out of line ever or whatever. Whereas like sometimes I see what other people are doing, I'm like, holy crap. Like David was just crushing me until I figured that out.
Yeah, well, you know.
He might still crush me. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. But, you know, it's at least like nice to know.
Yeah. Another one is in poker, when you win, you spend to celebrate, and then when you lose, you spend to keep from feeling bad.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can you have to adjust your life to those kind of taxes. And of course, the bigger you play, the more money it takes to feel better.
Yeah. It's funny, that's of all the dumb stuff I've done in my life and all the leaks I've had, that was never an issue for me particularly. I'm like, I've never needed to buy too many things. And the things I put my money in that I'm like the most excited to put my money into are generally like investments because I like the sweat of watching them go up or down. So yeah.
Do you really like seeing them go down? Do you?
No, I don't like seeing them go down. I don't even in the sense of like, you know, they say it's more enjoyable to your brain to like lose gambling than win. Even in that sense, I don't enjoy it very much. But yeah, I do like the sweat very much so. So yeah, I've been very fortunate in that aspect.
We have royalty in the chat, JJ De La Garza.
Let's go.
Speaking one of the best game selectors in the entire history of poker, JJ De La Garza. He gets flack. He gets slack for it, and it was like, dude, that just shows like, you know, wisdom.
Yeah.
About like win rate. Like, you know, I definitely had my battling days, and I look back, I'm like, why? I
mean, I like to battle, but I like to battle on my own terms. So like, I want to be wildly overrolled if I'm going to battle with somebody, so that I can just enjoy the strategy of it and like counter strategies and not think about how like, oh shit, this is a 25K pot. You know what I mean? I think that's important. Like, you know, for some people, if 10-20 is their main game, and they go down to 2-5, and there's somebody who's just going for it. Like, they're happy to battle as hard as they want. But if they come up to their 10-20 game and they're sitting 400 blinds deep, maybe things change a little bit. And I mean, that kind of goes back to your whole point, like finding people's thresholds for pain.
Yeah.
But finding your own threshold for pain is really important too.
Oh yeah, and that's something that like Garrett Adelstein just like he knows his own thresholds, and he really loves studying other people's thresholds. And if your threshold is like incredibly high, he just has no interest in playing you.
I mean, does Garrett have a threshold?
He does, yeah. No, I mean he talks about it. It just like he's worked on his threshold because he definitely has like a lot of gambling, like neutral EV gambling, just gambling in general. Like, you know, he'll attest to this event too. There's one day he was like buried like 100 or 200K at the 1020 no limit at Commerce, and or maybe it was a bigger stake, whatever. He was buried.
He was stuck 200K at 1020.
Yeah, it was some. I don't know the number. I don't want to get it wrong. It's, you know, we know of all these stories can be exaggerated, but anyway, he offered to flip for 100K with juice. So I don't know what stakes he was playing. I don't know how much he was buried, but he offered to flip for juice.
Wow.
So I think it was 2%, and then he, you know, he said this story on Live with the Bike, which was the people who were willing to flip against him pooled a lot of their money together for that 2%. And he was partially making fun of himself and making fun of the professional poker.
Do you think part of him felt like the 2%, like giving up the 2% was worth watching like a lot of pain for these guys?
I don't think it was pain. He was just like, one, I know he wasn't proud of doing it, you know, offering the 2% juice. He all knew, like, he knew he was tilted. The other thing is he is a little shameful and disgusted, I believe, of like professional poker, of how desperate it can be that people are just like fighting for fractions of EV. And he's like, you know, in his own life too, he's reflected on this, you know. And just like it's one of the things that can make poker like ugly from time to time is like how proud of you are to just pile on like 0.02, right? It's just like you can live life like that, or maybe you don't have to, or you don't want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, no, he definitely has tested his own threshold, and you know, I'm gonna just say this like objectively. I don't think he'll take it the wrong way. Like, I don't really have that kind of gamble in me, like he does. You know, he's like, run it once, right? I mean, just, you know, and I prefer to run it twice, just out of like friendliness sake and variance sake. But he enjoys pain, whether it's his or his opponent's, and just like he's reflected and explored himself, and just, you know, I think another thing too, this was on the Live of the Bike stream. It was kind of joking. There was this Netflix series, I don't know what it's called, and he was like, has anybody seen this Netflix series, which was like a psychoanalysis of like twisted minds or something? And he's like, maybe I'm the weird one for liking this stuff. And I'm just like, no, maybe we're the weird ones for not liking it. Like, you know, I don't know, it just depends what you're interested in.
I think as long as he's self-reflecting on that,
yeah,
and wondering which is correct,
yeah,
he's still in his right mind, you know?
Right.
The moment he's just like, yeah, why doesn't everyone like this? It's great. Like, that's when you got issues.
That's fair. So the legend JJ de la Garza is asking you, the legend Jesse Sylvia, do you have any advice for the stand-up game?
Okay, so I guess I'll give you a quick rundown on how I look at it. Basically, I try to visualize the game as there's an invisible number of dollars that are in every given pot, because, or are added to every given pot, because that's your equity of winning the pot and getting out of the stand-up game. So like, let's say you start with 9 players. Let's say that everyone has to pay $50. If you lose the stand-up game, then Your if you win the pot, it's like there's an extra $50 in there, right? Because you get to you don't have to pay out and you get $50. As you get down to less and less players, that number goes up, right? So when you get down to, let's say it's you and one other player, and let's say that it's a heads up pot between you two, then there's essentially 450 in the pot, right? Because this is like at a 8-handed table, right? Because there's 50 that you'll get additionally if you win the pot, and 400 that you won't lose if you win the pot. So then there's an extra 450 in the pot. So when you're calculating pot odds, there's an extra 450 in the pot. If the other player is not in the pot, but you're in the pot, then, and you're the last two left, then it's essentially worth half of that, right? Because if you don't win the pot, you still have a 50% chance of not losing the stand-up game. But if you win the pot now, you definitely win all that money. So, sorry, it's like there's an extra 450 in the pot still. But no, yeah, because you can still win it half the time if you don't win that pot. Yeah, so it's like I think it's like 225 or something like that. Assuming that you're both equally likely to win the pot the next given hand or whatever. But that's kind of, this is a very like rough version of how I would really get into it, but so it's like this sliding scale where it becomes, more and more important the less people are left to win the pot. The less people that are left in the stand-up game. And then obviously you can size up your opens because of that, or you can size up your 3-bets because of that. You also are, incentivized to peel a little bit more because there's additional money in the pot potentially if you win it. So you can peel weaker hands pre-flop. It gets really interesting when most people are out of the stand-up game and you're still in, because they'll be opening to a regular size, but a regular size offers you really good pot odds to enter the pot. And then, of course, like, this is stuff you probably already worked out, but like, for instance, if the other person left in the stand-up game, or let's say the other person on a 3 left in the stand-up game opens, you're getting tremendous pot odds to call and continue against them because you're essentially defending the pot because you can't let them win the stand-up game. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, no, it's huge, and it's why getting to sit down very early is just great, and then a lot of pressure like later on.
Yeah, that's like the hard to quantify benefit, right? Is like if you get to sit down really quickly, now you have all these people
fighting
who are incentivized to play that pot, but like it's just adding extra money to your pot.
Yeah,
that you have like a good hand in, whereas they have like pretty weak hands or whatever.
Yeah, it's pretty tough.
Game's great, man. It's like one of the best. I think it's one of the best innovations for.
Yeah, definitely. Lately. I actually, I'm known for being very good at the double boards, like especially PLO.
Those are great too.
But I don't think they're good for the game.
The problem with those is if people are playing well, they become really nitty, and it's kind of. I don't want to say boring because it's never boring because nobody really knows what they're doing, but it just doesn't incentivize action like 7 Deuce does or the stand-up game or something like that.
Yeah, like I said from the beginning, and this was in JJ's game too, it's like bomb pots are actually not good for the ecosystem because they're punishing the wrong people. They're not punishing the pros enough. Like what happened, I went to Sacramento to visit JD, and I was at Stones, and they had double board PLO bomb pots, and like I was just like annihilating the pros. And just like, at some point, they're going to be the ones like, they haven't got to that point. But if you leave me with all the recreational, even like I was annihilating the pros too, but I'm just going to take everything like really quickly during those double board PLO bomb pots. And that doesn't help the ecosystem. It helps me personally, obviously, but you want things to like, induce it. Like a competent player knowing that you need to sit down first in the stand-up game is fine because everybody knows that. Even the weakest player at the table knows that. Mm-hmm. And the problem with the double boards is like once your technical skill gets so high, and like we were talking about when you were here, you start separating into primary and secondary boards, then you're just too good compared to the field, and you're punishing the wrong people. You know.
No, it's similar to why I like PLO Cash so much, because No Limit has just gotten to the point where there's such large edges that like a new player just kind of gets skinned alive.
Yeah.
Whereas like in PLO, like they can win pots, like you can find a win. You can pile your money in pre-flop and you have 40%.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that, but like, I guess I don't want to reveal too much. But the way I coach, like, so I coach like, I stopped coaching millennials and Gen Z people. They're hopeless. But like, I coach people who have like very successful like real careers. So you got a taste of a little bit of the double board stuff, like how I just break it down in kind of like layman's and human colloquial terms, and just like I broke down PLO in a way that is actually not that much variance for them to win.
In double board?
No, in regular PLO. At both. Double board and regular PLO. Actually, there's going to be still more variance in double board in the sense that it's really hard to get a hammerlock on the board.
Yeah.
But for regular PLO, like if you stay in position, so I'll break down like a little bit. If you just view the pre-flop raise as kind of like your entry, just consider your entry into the hand. And a 3-bet is kind of like the maximum that you want to put in because it's a post-flop game. So if you have certain attributes, high card, connectivity, nuttedness, like you just play those hands in position and you only enter for like a single raise. You don't even necessarily have to 3-bet. That's basically your entry fee, and you actually just don't have that much variance because when you hit the board, you're frequently like 2-1 favorite, sometimes even like 90-10. Because you have other people playing these like rundowns, like Jack 10, 9, 8 double suited, when your hands just like dominate them. Mm-hmm. So you guys have the same draw, except you're free rolling them like 2-1. So I don't know. The thing is, like, the mistake I made coaching like 20 years ago is trying to turn everyone into a winning player. Yeah, that shit is not going to happen. But when people have successful careers, they're really smart. So if you can teach them the way that they like to play, but better, and also put high EV spots into layman's terms, they get better like really quickly. An example of like breaking something down is for tournaments, like the top 9 hands, maybe even top 11, are always going to collide pre-flop. It doesn't matter who you are.
Okay.
In the positions, maybe whatever, under the gun 1, under the gun 3, maybe only the top 7 hands collide. But in basically like low jack and beyond, all the top 11 hands are pretty much going to collide. So there's no skill in that.
Well,
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. That was wrong. It's not no skill.
Yeah, it's unavoidable. You're saying like when you have the bottom end of those 7 or the top end or whatever.
Yeah, so there's skill, with bet sizing, maneuvering post flop, whether you stack off with the bottom ends of those ranges against certain players, but you're gonna lose chips regardless. If like those hands are colliding no matter what, to some extent. Yeah. So I told them to focus on like high EV spots and uncontested pots, because those are things you could prove. Like, I don't know what the whole button limp versus button min raise, like, I looked at the range, like king 3 suited, king 2 suited, the queen jack off, like the aces. I don't know like how to squeeze out the 0.02 extra versus what I'm doing, but I know it exists, and I just tell people not to focus on that spot because it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But there's other spots like, the small blind versus big blind, or big blind versus small blind, or versus button, like exploitations that, over 11 years of online, I've just like tested. And of course, like, I don't know if I know everything. I mean, high chances are I don't know everything, maybe not even close. But I do know some things that, people today or at least the sites that I'm playing on aren't executing. Hashtag shout out to Global Poker. So I just tell these guys and myself even to focus on high EV spots. Like all the marginal stuff, even if I'm wrong, I'm not gonna be wrong by that much. Like I have this other millennial, he's like, he shipped 12 big blinds with 8s, like under the gun 2. I'm like, it's probably like a min raise folded 3-bet, but you rip for 12, it's like not a big deal. He's like, I ran to queens. I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, do you know the EV difference between min raise fold to rip or rip 12?
With which hand on what position?
Pocket 8s, like under the gun 2. If you have 12 big blinds in a tournament.
Well, if you min raise, you're probably calling with 8s, but
okay, I was gonna fold to a rip, though, depending on which position, obviously.
Okay.
If it's right after you probably fold.
I think the difference between ripping and min raising is probably pretty marginal, though.
Exactly, yeah. That's literally what I told him.
I think it's slightly better to rip maybe exactly 8s, but like, I mean, you're right. Like, I think your main point stands. Like, all of these spots are extremely close.
Yeah, and the whole thing about
not your best way of making equity.
So what I guess, like, you know, you're right. Like, I didn't specify the situation. If you min raise 8s under the gun 2, if the guy after you rips or 3-bets, you're probably folding, or the big blind 3-bets, you're probably folding, and then the rest of the spots, depending on their stack and who's left, you probably call off. Right?
Yeah.
So
I'm just checking out EV differences between the two.
Yeah,
it looks like it's exactly the same.
It's exactly
the min raise or
rip 12.
Rip 8s.
Okay, so one, proving our point, but two, if I min raise 8s and fold to a rip, if somebody rips right after me or from the big blind and then call off the rest of them, that's probably a superior play, but it doesn't, like, it's not going to make that big of a difference.
No.
Like, when I'm 12 tabling, rip's fine. I will rip if I'm 12 tabling. I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. When you're playing a lot of tables too, there's a lot to be said for reducing your number of difficult decisions unnecessarily like that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to be said for one of the smartest players I know, maybe the smartest poker player I know, recently said something. I thought he was joking at first, but he was dead serious, and it makes a ton of sense. He goes, I like to call it off a couple times early in my session on Sunday. He's like, it does two things. One, it gets out of my system, and two, it reminds me that nobody ever fucking bluffs. I was like, that's really nice.
We get him with that ace king one time.
Yeah.
And they get cots 9s plus all the others. Yeah, no, I mean, there's several like high EV spots in tournaments that they don't teach you in training sites that I tell the successful people that I coach, and they all come back to me, they're like, dude, that was so good. I'm like, I know. I know. But all the millennials are just like, was this 3-bet or this 4-bet in a good spot? I'm like, I don't fucking know, dude. Like, go ask Jesse Sylvia. Because those are just
that's my forte, baby.
Yeah. Or
Let's
Landon.
go.
I don't know. Like, you know, I'm not beyond ripping the ace X suited, especially the ace 4, the ace 5, but it's not gonna be that often, but it does happen.
All right. It's getting late. Should we rank all the ones that we talked about in order?
Let's do it.
Of importance.
So
and
we'll
put them across the screen in editing. That'll be cool.
One last thing with trivia, it was against Brian Kim, the 100K flip with 2% juice. JJ De La Garza cleared that up. So, yeah, let's rank it. What's?
Oh, that's what JJ was saying. He did want to see pain.
Yeah, no, we know. Like, Garrett's like he's into his own pain too, man. Like, he gets like some sick happiness, like understanding his own pain thresholds.
Yeah. For sure.
So yeah, number 1, why you're not going to make it as a professional poker player.
Or do you want to do why you're not going to make it, or do you want to do things you need to have to?
Well, I would say that, like, let's make it more dramatic and say, if you fuck these things up, you're not going to make it as a professional poker player.
Okay.
Start from number
Okay.
one, which is basically is most important.
Um,
What do you say the most important is?
let's say, I mean, all right. Well, so what's your number one? Let's start with that.
My number one is bankroll management.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I was thinking emotional control, but yeah, it's probably bank. It's close, man. It's tough.
It's tough.
You
Yeah.
can't, if you don't have bankroll management, you're just going to keep going broke. And if you don't have emotional control at the table, it doesn't really matter what your bankroll is if you're not a winning player.
I'll tell
But
you, in the past, JJ Garza definitely had way better bankroll management than me. Not that I'm even bad for like a pro player, but like nowadays, I think JJ would have me above him because I'm just like not putting anything at risk. But yeah,
yeah, that's fair.
I would say
I know friends who have pretty terrible bankroll management, but they're good at poker and they always knew they could go get staked.
yeah. I mean, like when I went broke, I got staked, and there's like a couple situations, especially in like the private setting, that I get staked by the game runner because I'm basically a prop. But I don't like being staked. I don't like having to justify like my plays because like there's a certain part of my game that's very exploitative and like feel, and I'm not always going to be right. And I don't
Mhm.
want to have to justify that to like, somebody who's backing me. So for the people who back me, I tell them, do you want me to play ABC close to whatever theory, or are you going to just let me do what I do? And they almost always say the latter. And they almost always never regret it. Probably sometimes they do regret it, but
I'm gonna say my number one thing is you can't seem to play your A or B game consistently.
yeah. My dramatic take on that, like I said earlier, is your F game is going to have more impact on your poker career than your A game. But yeah, if you start dipping below, like
I
your
like
B
the way
game,
you put that. Sorry to interrupt, but I like the way you said that more than the way I said that.
got to make it dramatic.
If you
Man.
say that again, I'm writing that down.
Your F game, you better quote me on this. Give me fucking credit because Chat Pro is actually mine, and like I don't know who the fuck stole it. HCL.
Oh, I'm just writing this down so that we can put it when you do editing, we can put it right across the screen, you know?
Your F game is going to have more impact on your poker career than your A game.
On your poker career and your A game. I'm making that the first. Okay. Number one reason you won't make it in poker, your F game has more impact on your poker career than your A game. Number two,
That's fair.
you can't stay within your bankroll.
Yeah.
It sounds like between those two, like
That's
maybe you have my two as your one and my one as your two, but
Sure.
it seems like those are the two most.
Yeah. That's why, this millennial, I just got super like intense and frustrated with him. He was like actually scared for a bit, I think. He could comment after he listens to this. He just saw a side of me. He probably knew it was inside of me, but didn't see
You go
it.
off on him, Wayne?
I went off.
Let's go.
For like
Never seen you even remotely close to angry. I'd love to watch this.
he could tell you the story. I could group text you guys too, and he could tell you how he felt. He didn't tell you he did not feel good. But to his credit, I was coaching him like 2 to 3 concepts a day, and after 2 weeks, he was like, "Wow, I was really bad at poker," and he still knows he's like not good, so to say. But the concepts I was showing him, I'm like, "You don't even get this. You can't possibly be winning." Like, it's just physically impossible.
Yeah.
One of the ones that, you might agree with is like in PLO, as trips with 3 kickers is like, only a slight dog to an underfull. But one, why do you even have an underfull? Like, you should quit PLO. But 2 is if you could read when your opponent hits their bigger full house and just like check fold, you pretty much need that skill set in order to navigate under fulls anyway. And then if you get it in under full against trips with 3 kickers, high trips with 3 kickers, and you start bitching that you lost with the underfull when the run out comes, you clearly don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You cannot be a winning PLO player. So I was using that as one of the examples, like, you don't even know this, or you're acting this way in this certain circumstance, you physically cannot be a winning PLO player. Because that's where a big chunk of your provable EV comes from.
I hope this kid filmed
Mic
the
drop.
rant. That's all I know.
No, but he could tell you about it. I'm probably not going to get that upset I mean, I've gotten pretty upset in the last few years, but yeah, it's not pretty, man.
I just imagine him grabbing out his camera like he's about to witness an assault and pulling it up and hitting record.
Okay, well, that's our top 2. What's number 3 for you?
I'm gonna say you aren't consistently improving, but man, the whole like you're not capable of making a plan and sticking to it is very important as well. I'm gonna make that number 3 for me, I think.
I think you're wrong. I think it's game selection.
Oh, we didn't even talk about game selection.
Yeah, so I think,
You're right.
game selection and seat selection, which, really bad.
We talked about. I didn't think about game selection when we're making the list, is what I meant to say.
I think people overrate their EV in any given game. When I first set out to do global poker, I had no idea what was going to happen. I had no idea what my ROIs would be. I would ask like Dylan Lindy and just like all these other tournament wizards, like, what's a good ROI, blah, blah, blah. They said they don't know either. The variance is too high. And then Dylan Lindy came on and watched me stream for like an hour. I was already winning, but after listening to Dylan Lindy's genius for like an hour, my shit went straight up.
Mm-hmm.
But that's part of because like, I have a lot of experience. But what he said was really huge about, tournament selection. You don't jump into 218 dailies with King in the North every day.
King.
Shout out to Dan Matthews. My ROI of the daily 218s was still positive when I quit. But game selecting in tournaments is like, if the bubble's taking too long to bust, it's not worth my time. It means everybody's like paying attention. I think that's like a pretty big one.
Yeah.
For like these, I'll say low stakes. It's only low stakes, compared to the fucking super high roller bowls. High stakes online, but, low stakes compared to like the whatever 250Ks. If the bubble's taking too long to bust, which happens a lot in the 218s on global daily, the weekday ones, then I'm like, this is just a brutal use of time.
Just because the bubble is your best indicator for you that players are good.
That they're at least paying attention.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
if the bubble's bursting like pretty quickly, like within 20 minutes, even 20 minutes is kind of a long time.
I like the idea of having specific indicators for deciding that, and I like the bubble being one of them. That's really smart.
The thing is, like, when it gets to the final table, I have so much shorthanded, like, no limit cash game experience that's just not going to bother me. I'm not facing against like online wizards when I hit the final table and we're shorthanded.
Mm-hmm.
But the bubble in these bigger MTTs, especially the daily ones, which the regulars are playing, everybody knows that stuff. That stuff's easy to study. Don't bust, don't bubble. Like, everybody knows that's playing, that's competitive and playing these tournaments. When that's like taking too long, done.
So I also think there's another side of the coin to the whole game selection thing, where generally when people talk about game selection, especially when they're talking about cash games, they think of it in a sense of like, I won't play this game because I don't know if I'm beating it, or I won't play this game because I don't think I'm beating it. But game selection is way more importantly used in the sense of which of these two games is making me more money. And there are plenty of times where the 5-10 game is the second biggest game in the room, but there's 3 tables of it, and that game's going to make you a way higher hourly than trying to like grind it out the 10-20 versus 6 regs and like a rec who's a smart guy.
Yeah, exactly. So
And
yeah.
you might be winning in both, but like, I think quite often it's not even a choice between winning or not winning, but it's a choice between winning more and or having way lower variance while you're winning.
And this is what I tell the millennials and the Gen Z people I was coaching, which I'm kind of like really fed up with, is like, how do you...
You're firing shots at the millennials tonight.
Screw, like, dude, there's some people, like, I don't even care, like, who's better than who, but, like, there's some millennials that were just like, oh, Wayne's washed up. He's, oh, yeah, I am washed up, but I'm still going to win. But he's just like, he sucks. I'm like, okay, whatever. See you at the end of the year. But they're just like, I don't even remember which topic I was going on when I was firing shots. But yeah, I don't remember what I was talking about. But well, it's definitely for number 4. But yeah, no, game selection is like when there's too many people who just like aren't giving it away. It's like, is it even worth your time? You could be the best player on the table and just like nothing's happening,
Yeah, and then there's the effects of like, even if you make, let's say you make $80 an hour at a 5-10 game, but you make 85 an hour at the 10-20 game, your variance is way higher.
At the 10-20.
Yeah, and like when you have higher variance, you inevitably have more losing days, and then you have more days where your brain wants to recover after a losing day, and you have like more stretches of like losing long periods of time where you start questioning your game. And like there's just a lot of I don't want to say exponential effects, but like almost like runoff effects that we don't really think about, but they're real, and
they definitely affect you exponentially. Like I remember a year or two propping, I think, what year was it? 2016 or 17? I think it was 17. I was losing like 90% of those hands I was dealt, and like people saw it and they would like talk about it like a days later, and it's live. So it'll last forever. So I would complain to JJ de la Garza and Dan Zach, and they would console me for a bit. And then one day, like Dan Zach's like, "Wait, you need to stop like talking like those losing players." And I'm like, "You're right." So I just fucking manned up, and it ended shortly after. But just like I needed that like yelling, because you can only be sympathized for so long, even though it is happening. But I acknowledge Dan, that was a really good talk from him that day, because like you just really can't, like, especially since I'm like older than them, so I know what I'm getting myself into. Like when you're coming up, you have your peers to bitch to, but like after you get to a certain age point, like bitch minimally. Like we chose to do this, like we have to accept it. We have to accept it when things go bad. You can't enter the main just being like, I'm definitely gonna win. I'm definitely gonna final table. I'm definitely gonna runner up like Jesse Sylvia.
You earlier you said we all have weeks where we run good. I was like, you should really choose the week of the main event to run good.
That's definitely true.
If you're gonna pick a week,
So yeah, I had number 3 game selection, which tournaments it's kind of tougher to quantify. Well, it's not. I mean, it's easier on a macro scale, but like harder on a micro scale to quantify. But cash games, like, yeah, I mean, you could really underestimate people's abilities or how much they're giving it away.
Yeah. The nice thing is if you're playing 1K and under MTTs or 1600 or under MTTs, and you're studying every day and you're a smart person, it's hard to screw up game selection.
Are you talking about live or are you talking about online?
Yeah, I'm talking about live. Sorry.
Yeah, I was like, those are pretty competitive fields.
Yeah, no. 1Ks online might be very, I mean, if you go play 1Ks on stars and you're not elite, you're getting torched. But yeah, no, like live, it's harder to screw up game selection there. You obviously can, and there's still better tournaments and worse tournaments, right? But yeah, with cash games, it becomes very crucial very quickly.
Yeah, just like seeding, like like we talked about earlier, like if you're in the cutoff and the button's like three betting you relentlessly or at a high enough frequency, it's where it's giving you trouble. Like, because the thing is, like, you could still be you could still be competent out of position, cut off against button, and it's still going to take a while to figure out. Because like you're not like when you're out of position, you have so many less tricks than the guy in position, who could just like check back, flop, turn, or river whenever the fuck they want. You know, like you really have to like know their game and exploit them to just like definitively know that you can fight back out of position effectively. And even then, the variance is just going to be just like way bigger.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that was my number 3. Your number 3 or number 4?
Number 4, I'm picking you're incapable of sticking to a plan you've made, or incapable of making a plan and sticking to it. So I mean that could have to do with bankroll, that could have to do with study hours, that could have to do with your sleep, that could have to do with your general schedule, that could have to do with your spending.
Oh yeah.
Which all of which we've touched on.
Shots fired.
But yeah, I mean, if you can't make a plan and stick to it, at least come close to sticking to it. Obviously, you know, you can always throw yourself a little treat every now and then. You can take a day off of whatever when you were planning not to. But yeah, if you can't mostly stick to a plan, you're gonna have a lot of trouble in poker. You have a lot of trouble in life, but life's a lot easier when you show up to someone else's office and just put in the hours and go home, right? When you're showing up to your own office and putting in the hours, like how hard you put in the hours matters, or how you put in the hours matters.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a lot of trouble if you don't stick to a plan.
Yeah, and like age is actually a thing. Like, you know, like I've aged out of like competitive play in a sense that like I just don't care. Like I don't care which, like I remember like in my early 20s, I'm like, oh my god, this spot's like 10% higher EV than this other spot. Now I'm just like, whatever, dude, it's close enough.
Well, I've watched you operate, Wayne, and your plan is to just have so many things on your plate that you just wake up and go every morning because you got to.
I can't fail at all of them, right?
Yeah.
I'm lucky.
No, you just wake up and grind.
I'm lucky none of them falling apart, but I definitely like. Well, this was what made me really not regret my choices, and shout out to Lyman too for. I was heading that direction anyway, but really just solidifying it. Just like the year or the 14 months that I was just like losing like every hand in a row. Thankfully, one I was propping, so you know, and I was doing live with the bike too. But just like if I was just a vanilla pro, that's gonna break you. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're dealt a losing hand like 90% of the time for like a year, you're donezo.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asking like Zach Freeman or Lyman, whoever, like how often that could happen. Maybe 1 out of 20 years. Like if you don't have a safety net or whatever. So, but
yeah.
Do you rank? Well, originally you ranked like 4 as like technical skill. Do you think that's like 4 or 5?
Well, because the theme is reasons you won't make it in poker, I try to be like, I think a couple of these kind of touch on technical skill, but I try to get to like the root of the issue, which isn't like your technical skill so much as like, are you studying? Are you getting better? Are you know what I mean? Like, and then it all kind of equates to technical skill anyway. So I didn't know if we need to make that its own thing.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is like, can you even judge technical skill? Because like in many eras, like elite players totally misjudged a small amount of people that were just way ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
And
yeah, exactly.
I can't think of the names right now. I mean, it's like some people were just like, it's like, you know, those nerdy guys with, you know, the meme with the caveman, the nerdy guy, the glasses, the guy in the hood. It's like when all the nerdy guys in the glasses can't recognize the guy in the hood. That's a bad spot.
Oh, the bell curve one.
Yeah,
yeah,
the bell curve. Yeah.
That's the crypto meme.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the 20 IQers and the 180 IQers are like on the same wavelength somehow, and the guy in the middle is just crying every time.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there was a graph or a curve back in the day. Or not a curve. I don't know what you call it, but it was like a list of the stakes, right? And it was like what happens at each stake. And 5K no limits, like 25.50, which was like the biggest for a while online, and the lowest stake, like 10 cent, 25 cent, or whatever. Both had idiots will call you down with Jack High. And then like the next one was like top pair, I'm all in, and that was like the second highest, second lowest. And then the middle one was just like guys nut pedaling for like a set every time. And it was kind of, I mean, it's not true, but it's like kind of true, you know?
Yeah.
There's a fine line between a good Jack High call down and a bad Jack High call down. But yeah, I do feel like when you said
are you
game
attacking,
selection for number 3.
Are you attacking anybody for Jack High call down? I'm just kidding. Anyway, go ahead. Game selection.
Yeah. Well, when you said game selection for number 3, I feel like that's more important than technical skill.
Yeah.
Because technical skill is just always relative to the game that you're in. So it doesn't really.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't go play. You need really, really high technical skill to go play 25-50 online at this point, if that game even runs anymore.
Yeah.
But that's still game selection to some extent, right? And you could study your way up to that. But anyways, so I don't know. How do you feel about my number 4 sticking to making a plan, sticking to it? I feel like that's an underrated part of.
Yeah.
All right, then for the fifth and final one, I put. You are not consistently improving. I don't know if you feel like there's anything that needs to be above that, but
you could also, like, what I do now is just play in less competitive fields where you can never really be overtaken, I guess. I mean, you're like, okay, if you're purely playing for max EV, this is not a thing that you could do. It's only because I'm doing a lot of other things and I could do this on the side, so to say.
Okay. But then, I mean, in theory, if you're doing that, then you're constantly moving down in stakes, right?
Yeah, or just finding different pools. Because the thing is, even if you... I care more about the ecosystem and making sure I'm a favorite in the pools now, rather than max EV. Mm-hmm. So if a pool like starts drying up, I'm just going to leave it before it dries up. Because there's going to be a point where you just like wake up and go there, and it's like... Are you even winning, or like, is this worth your time? When if you're constantly having options for different pools, you could just pick either the highest EV one or the one with, you know, your lower variance graph straight up kind.
Yeah, this is kind of that classic networking versus improving argument. Like, do you put your time into finding better games, or do you put your time into getting better? But like, obviously, like the answer is both, because we don't have that few hours in the day. We can obviously do a little bit of both. Generally, I mean, obviously some people have to split, but yeah, I guess my point is, like, even if you are getting into better pools, it's obviously very good for your win rate in your game if you're improving as well. So I think it's like an important one for sure. But you're right. You could not really improve and be a winning professional poker player for a long time.
Well, I'm gonna say like
something better for number 5.
Even though I'm not in my quote prime compared to the field, I am still improving every day. I guess I'm not as obsessed as I was before.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's more just like the skill set I'm hammering more is finding ecosystems where the money's not running out and I'm definitively plus EV.
I mean, I think that's like kind of an improvement as well. It's just you're not improving your technical game, but you're improving like your skill as like a professional gambler.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know. So I guess that's. I mean, I would still think that's like I bet you Lyman would think that that's an important part of improving as a poker player.
Yeah, and like yeah, Lyman does the same thing in other aspects, where it's like you need to find good bets in different areas, like
Mm-hmm.
whether it's golf, sports, crypto, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you think that's top 5? And if people like this, then smash the thumbs up, hit subscribe, follow Jesse, Sylvia, and what's your Twitter?
Mr. Jesse James. I want to say 4. Let's see.
I'm looking. Yep, 4.
You beat me to it.
Yeah, Mr. Jesse James 4. And
I'm
then
the 4th. In a long line of Mr. Jesse Jameses.
I'm D22-_soso. Now on Instagram too, and Twitter. Hope you guys like this. You have any parting words for the guys who are definitely not going to make it in professional poker? Jesse, any final words?
Oh! I thought you were asking the chat. I'm
No.
sorry. Final words.
Don't do it.
Yeah, probably not, honestly. I mean, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy showing up to the table with coffee every day and talking some trash with players and stuff. But maybe do something else if you're on the fence about it. Oh, somebody said something recently. I'll use this as my final word. Somebody said something recently. Was it you who said this? Maybe.
I don't know. I have to hear it.
If you're on the fence about if you're polling people and asking multiple people whether or not you should quit your job and become a professional poker player,
Oh yeah.
don't do it.
Yeah.
Like
You've already lost.
yeah, like you know if you want to be a professional poker player, you feel with every fiber of your being. Trust me.
Yeah.
Like a lot of things that are tougher roads to tread down.
Yeah, no, I mean, because if you're trying to decide, you're trying to decide, you literally do not have the conviction to get over some things that are just inhuman to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you got? Give us your final word of wisdom.
Don't do it. I don't even know. Like, we started from the bottom when the moneymaker boom happened. We had such an easy time to like learn because we could not be that great. We could be better in the field, but like not that great from an objective skill set sense and still win.
Yeah.
And now I've played a lot, almost every game at almost every stake. I mean, I don't play the nosebleed no limits in this era, so I don't know what that's like. I presume it's pretty miserable. But having that knowledge of approximately how I don't even know what win rate would be, but how your graph would look over long term, that's something that you're just not going to know until you have millions of hands online and hundred thousands of hands live. And that's what actually should jurisdict where you should be playing, is where your estimated graph is. Like, if it's all your only professional poker, you could have a higher variance graph, but it still needs to be like pretty straight up, or you're just dead.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I would do on PokerStars or GG because they're illegal in the US. But if I saw the field and I saw the stakes, I would have an estimate of like how I would be doing. But I'm going to stick to legal stuff because I'm in the United States.
So ACR.
I'm not on ACR because Mac Verstandig said that shit's illegal. But I don't know. I'm just like, I'm not going to confirm or deny, but a couple lawyers told me I best stay off. So yes,
Wow.
Not tonight.
All right, we'll cut that part out.
Well, no, it's fine. Like you guys, if you want to play ACR, that's your thing. Like I'm not against it. Just like I personally won't do it. Hey, there's a lot of stuff like home games and app games going on that like that shit's not good. That's not legal. But
That's true.
Again, I don't know. We'll see. Only time will tell. Just like Net Teller and Black Friday, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, guys, we've taken enough of Jesse's time. Runner-up 2012 World Series of Poker main event and WPT winner Jesse Sylvia. Watch him on Live at the Commerce, Live at the Tropicana, the former Live at the Bike, and other future streams. Take it easy.
Okay.